Well, let's talk to someone who definitely is not flying with, a lockdown skeptic who's been campaigning, I have to say, valiantly on this issue. Sir Desmond Swayne, Tory MP for the New Forest West, and he's been among the many rebel MPs who voted against the second national lockdown. And no doubt Sir Desmond would vote against another one, although may not get a vote because, of course, it'll be a lockdown in name, in reality, but not in name, won't it?
Well, whatever. The reality is that the government has the power to impose it. And certainly we've seen the pitch being rolled for ending one lockdown and entering it in some form of another. I'm just speechless about the way that people simply shrug as our liberties are taken away and we're told, well, we may be able to meet another family at Christmas, but, you may not. I keep reminding people that the last time a government sought to interfere with the celebration of Christmas, it was Oliver Cromwell. And he asked the question, if he were to arm 1 in 10 of the population, would that be enough to enforce it?
God, it's terrifying, isn't it? And this is the thing. I think there are millions of people like me who completely supported the first lockdown. New virus. Didn't know how deadly it was. We'd seen, the body bags piling up in northern Italy and what had happened in Wuhan in China. We were very, very, very scared. Our hospitals were not prepared. We needed the extra capacity. We didn't know how to treat this. We didn't know who was dying, what was the risk. There was a very good, strong argument. There were arguments against lockdown, but there were very good, strong arguments to understand why a lockdown early on was the right thing to do. Within a matter of weeks, it became clear we did have more information. Certainly within a couple of months, I definitely was someone who was thinking we should be getting out of lockdown much sooner than the government did. The argument of the second lockdown, we know that there was no impact assessment done. We know that because a cabinet minister has confirmed that to me. We've never seen it. You've asked for it. It's never been provided. It's not been done. If it has been done and it gave a good argument, let's be honest, they'd have put it out there. They haven't. We know that it's been done on modelling. Modelling again and again and again proved to be completely false, completely inaccurate, and completely useless. And yet, as you say, you are speechless, and so am I, that people are shrugging along and going with this. Do you think the vast majority of people are saying, yes, this is what we need to do. We cannot lose a single person to COVID, no matter how many other people die of everything else as a result, or the economy dies. COVID is the number one thing. People massively agree with that. Do you think people have been fooled into thinking this will make a difference? Or do you think that people are just pretending to go along?
Well, I'm told by the polls that people thirst for ever more restrictions on their liberty and ever greater lockdowns. But I've yet to find any of these people. The reality is that people come to me utterly frustrated and angry about what they're being required to do. And I'm certain that there would be much greater buy-in to a series of sensible measures if the government were to seek to persuade us and to level with us, present the data in a much more open and transparent way and say, look, it would be really helpful if you could do X, Y, and Z. But I don't think we're prepared to be told and ordered about as if we were in some fascist state any longer.
And yet, look, I think the lockdown is not only silly and wrong. I think it's costing lives. The reason I despair so much right now is it's not sort of, oh, well, I don't like it. It's not because I want to go to the pub. It's because I know, and the government knows, because they've seen the same figures that I are, that this is very clear. Lockdowns will cost more younger lives and ruin the economy for much longer than the alternatives, including this idea of letting it rip, which is not what anyone's calling for. So I think this is an existential battle that people are facing. The question is here, I'm not someone who's willing to break the law, not just because of my job. I'm kind of just brought up to be a law-abiding person. Okay, yeah, I'm sure I'm speeded above the speed limit a few times. I'm generally someone who abides by the law. And the British people generally are as well. We are seeing protests, more and more protests. We are seeing protests. I mean, there have been protests in France, in Germany, in Portugal, and many other places around Europe where people are saying enough is enough. We're not putting up with this anymore. The majority of people listening to this who don't like the lockdown, but they want to obey the law, what can they do to fight against it? That's where people feel powerless and despairing.
Well, their right to protest has been taken away, along with their right to worship and the right free association and all the rest, because, you can't join a demonstration. You stand to be fined up to £10,000 for being involved with a demonstration. So you can basically, I'm receiving, literally thousands of letters of week of protest. I think that's all people can do is demand action from their members of parliament. Parliament is supposed to represent the people. I think you've simply got to get through to us in parliament that you've had enough.
But the polls tell the government and all the MPs that what people want is more lockdown. They want more measures. They want more controls. They want more punishment for people who break them.
Well, that's why I'm scandalised that people simply shrug as liberties that were won at a huge cost over generations are swept away. But as I said, whilst the pollsters are telling us these things, I've yet to find these people. They're not, there's no deluge of protest in my inbox telling me that people want tougher measures. It's the opposite. People want control of their own lives again. And as I say, if the government were to level with us and seek to persuade us to behave in particular ways, I think it'd be much more successful than simply being ordered to do things.
Now, we know that there were a whole load of Tory MPs who voted against it, even abstained. I mean, amazing that Theresa May, a former Prime Minister and former Tory leader, actually abstained on that vote last time around. 34 of the 38 MPs who voted against were Tories for the lockdown measures. That legislation falls on December the 2nd. But the government has said we're going to go into some version of the tier system. There ain't going to be any tier 1 and tier 2 for anyone. It's going to be lockdown in all but name, even with some non-essential shops allowed to open. Good for them, but not much for people's freedoms. There is a requirement on the government under the emergency legislation that's been extended till March. There isn't a requirement on them to have another vote on that, is there?
No. The reality is that the government has powers under the 1984 Public Health Act to impose these things and simply introduce the statutory instruments subsequently. So effectively, the statutory instrument is a vote to annul the regulations rather than to implement the regulations. The government has the power to implement them anyway, and then subsequently have votes in Parliament. The government has said that it would nevertheless do things in advance, but it doesn't have to.
Why do you think Boris Johnson has gone ahead with the lockdown, is going ahead with all this talk and allowing people to give Downing Street press conferences talking about effectively 25 days of punishment? That's what it is, punishment for 5 days of seeing Granny and eating some turkey at the same table as Granny. Why do you think he's going ahead with this? Is it because he thinks it's popular? Do you think he is convinced by the medics? Because I'm always amazed the number of cabinet ministers I have on the show, including the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, who spout facts and figures to me, which I know are based on the government's own official data is untrue. I can't believe that the Prime Minister and his advisors aren't able to read a graph, read statistics, read what is going on in terms of the falling infection rates, the hospitals not being overwhelmed, the survival rate for people not just under 80 but over 80 from this virus. That they are not they must be seeing the same stuff as me, because these aren't subjective facts and figures. They are official objective data. If they're seeing the same stuff that I'm seeing and you're seeing, why would they be going ahead with these measures?
I can only speculate that they've been captured by this scientific establishment and are deaf to the clinical and scientific voices that are saying that they've got this wrong, and that they are, they simply can't grapple with the huge economic damage and healthcare damage that is being done by their policies. I think we just got to keep making the argument.
Well, we are going to keep making the argument. I know you've done a valiant job, and I salute you for that. Just finally, I must ask you about your previous job as an international development minister. All this money, £16.5 billion going on defence at a time when we're told the foreign aid budget will be cut. I mean, it will be cut automatically. Sorry, international development aid. It will be cut automatically anyway by the fact that it's a 0.7% of GDP spending, and of course GDP goes down with the doldrums we're in the economy now, so it would go down anyway. But what do you make of people who are saying, oh, you've got money for space-age weapons, but you haven't got money for the poorest in the world?
Well, I think space-age weapons are important, but equally, I think it's very important that we maintain our foreign aid budget, because this is our investment in a more stable and prosperous world. It is also the way that we effectively project power and influence in the world. And at a time when we're leaving the European Union, I think maintaining that power and influence, that soft power, is very, very important.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much indeed.